So good, so good, so good.
Just in, thousands of winter arrivals at your Nordstrom Rack store. Save up to 70% on coats, slippers, and cashmere from Kate Spade, New York, Vince, UGG, Levi's, and more.
Check out these boots.
They've got the best gifts.
My holiday shopping hack? Join the Nordy Club.
Get an extra 5% off every Rack purchase with your Nordstrom credit card. Plus, buy it online and pick it up in-store the same day for free. Big gifts, big perks. That's why you Rack.
At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality walking shoes, which might lead to another discovery.
40,000 steps, baby. Who's on top now, Karen?
You've taken the office step challenge a step too far. Don't worry, though. Sierra also has yoga gear. It might be a good place to find your zen. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
Unfiltered discussions. Unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Hello, welcome in. It's The Last Show where things are a little different. Our show kind of like an intimate dive bar with curious conversations. And here's what you're going to learn if you tune in to tonight's program. You'll often hear that gossip is toxic, that you should avoid it at all costs. But what if it's actually the secret to a happier relationship? In 10 minutes' time, a new study that looked at couples caught in the act of gossiping and found that they're happier. After that, it's your favorite body parts, toenails and tongues. A research group at a university is calling for all toenail clippings. That's right, toenail clippings. But why it might be the secret to fighting lung cancer. What's in your baby toe that could help you avoid lung cancer? Details halfway through the hour. And I know I said tongues. I think everyone should be scraping their tongue. It's covered in bacteria. So later in the hour, we'll talk to a dental medicine professor about what lurks on your tongue. That's just some of what we'll cover on tonight's show. You'll learn more. There will be more. But for now, let's dive in.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
And in the branding of potato chip companies news, we are joined by foreign correspondent Tony Five about a disturbing finding to do with Lay's potato chips. Tony, welcome to the show.
David, reporting live from a lay-by in London, which is an allegory, I guess. I feel like a cheap hooker waiting for someone to pick me up in the darkness, David. That's
what is a lay-by before we go? What is that? I don't even know what that is. What is that in like North American English?
Wait, you don't know what a lay-by is? So when you're on a motorway or a road and you have to pull over your truck, what do you call that? You pull over your car, but it's on the motorway, but it's like a side on it. So like next to me is loads of traffic going, but I'm on the side. You don't call it a lay-by?
No, we call it a shoulder. A shoulder.
No, that's on the body, David. Remember, I know you were very good at biology as a child, but a shoulder that is connected to the elbow, which is the knees and toes. I'm talking about something to do with roads.
Well, your extremely obscene comment about fishermen, that's what you mean by hooking. You
Yes.
hook the fish. Makes a lot more sense if you're on a shoulder. I don't know what a lay-by is. I know what the word lay means, but not a lay-by. But coincidentally, we're talking about Lay's potato chips.
There you go. See, David, I can bring a segment together like nobody else can. So, Lay's potato chips, obviously main constituent, David?
Main constituent of what? I don't understand this British English you're using.
So, like, what are potato chips, or as we like to call them, crisps? What are they made of?
Potatoes.
Of course they are. And what is the news story, David?
Well, 42% of surveyed consumers, when asked what the main ingredient of Lay's potato chips are, or I'll translate it for you, Tony, Lay's potato crisps, did not know that the principal ingredient in potato chips was potatoes.
I fear for this world. If there is an asteroid somewhere in the solar system about to hit Earth, I would say go for it. Do you know what? Just do it. Tell your asteroid buddies, yeah, you know what? We don't deserve it, David. If people don't know that potato chips are made of potatoes, what on earth do they think they are made of?
I don't know. Who's buried in Grant's tomb is the great question. We may never know. So in response to this, the company that owns Lay's is doing this branding campaign with farmers with sacks of potatoes so that the consumer knows that potatoes are in potato chips. And if you're one of those 42% of people listening right now and you're thinking to yourself, wow, I've learned something on this program. Potato chips are made of potato chips. What's next? Hamsters are made of ham? I don't know. I think you're a lost cause is what you are.
David, 42% of the people that didn't know is 100% of our demographic.
I guess we shouldn't be insulting them.
You should not be insulting our core listenership, David. I apologize out there. Don't worry. You don't need to know that Lay's potato chips are made of potato. They're just tasty goodness, Tasty roast beef flavored potato is fine.
Well, just in case you're wondering, hamsters are not made of ham.
And shepherd's pie are not made of shepherds.
Well, that's just not true. I mean, that's why it's illegal to make it, not because it tastes awful.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's fine.
Anyway, Tony, as much as I would like to cover this shocking story about potato chip marketing further, which is really an important story in the lives of our listeners, I do want to check in on you because yesterday you did something on the show that really reminded me of the early days of radio that you and I used to do back, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, where we would do dramatic things in our lives and we would only do it on the radio. Like I would get in a real fight with my girlfriend and she would call my radio program live and yell at me. And it was kind of like a real Jerry Springer show, except yesterday you did it in a very sad way. And I was grateful you shared that moment with me. But you let me know that you had to put your dog down over the weekend, very sad, live on the show, and you had not told me. And it was certainly compelling radio. It made me worry for you a little bit. And I guess my question is, and my follow-up is, how are you doing, my friend?
So, first of all, actually, it was only a few hours before I had spoken to you that Frank had been put to sleep. My dog Frank, my beautiful dog Frank. And yeah, I was still sort of kind of in shock, and I wanted to talk to you about it. And also, thank you to so many people who have sent me emails to tony@lastshow.pizza. It was really kind of you, and it was really nice. I guess a lot of people, it's nice to share people's stories about their dogs and their pets and, how they felt and what it meant to them. And about how I'm doing. Why I'm on a lay-by is actually I'm on a way back from work, and I kind of threw myself into work to get myself back into a routine. I could easily feel myself about to spiral. So for those who don't know, I've had my issues with depression, anxiety, and sort of mental health problems in the past. So David was concerned, which you are, and you were, and you are, and your girlfriend even texted me. How are you? What are you doing? It's normal to feel grief, which it is. But it happened so quickly. It was a real shock to the system, and I hadn't told anybody. Weirdly, you were like the second person I told, and then I told that 42% who still didn't know that potatoes are made of chips, or chips are made of potatoes. So it was me, you, that 42%, and the vet.
Well, I hope you're okay. I know you say you feel yourself getting depressed, but it's not spiraling. It's grief, and it's normal. And I've talked to a lot of psychiatrists. Even my shrink does this to me sometimes. When I'm kind of spiraling, he'll say to me, what you're experiencing, grief and sadness, are normal. Don't over-pathologize it. Don't just think because you go home and you have a good cry over losing your sweet pup, that it means that you're mentally unwell. Grief is a normal thing to experience. That's my only advice there.
Well, it's true. I think you've mentioned pathologizing stuff before, and I did buy a dictionary because of that.
Well, it just means treating normal emotions, even extreme ones, like there's some, mental illness, as opposed to just normal emotions that you would feel, even if they're strong ones.
Yeah, I guess it's like overanalysis or ruminating over something too much. And yeah, it would be sad. I mean, he was a massive part of my life. He was a massive part of my recovery. And losing him so quick was really sad and really hard. He was only 14 months old, full of life, and sort of developed a very, very, very aggressive and bad sort of a borderline sort of issue in his brain, which made him, unpredictable, resulting in him biting me. And I couldn't have, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself had he bitten anybody else, or like a child or my friends or anything.
No, it sounded like you did the right thing, but that doesn't make it any easier.
No, and that's the problem. Everybody keeps telling me I did the right thing, you were sensible, you're a good owner. I gave this dog the best possible life he could have had. And yeah, it was really sad. And I still will be sad, and, not pathologizing it. I will be sad for a while. And it was nice to connect to people that I could see and speak to, like you, and people that I couldn't speak to and see, like the audience.
Well, Tony, thanks for the update. Did you know that potato chips are made out of potatoes? I still love you. I'm sad what happened, and my heart goes out to you. Thanks for being here, buddy.
Thank you very much. Have a good night, and I'll speak to you soon.
Coming up after the break, don't you gossip. It's bad for you. Never do it. That's common wisdom. But is it right? What if telling secrets with your romantic partner is actually good for your relationship? Well, according to a new study, it is. Juicy details next.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
This episode is brought to you by Battlefield 6. Battlefield 6 is the ultimate all-out warfare experience. Rip through the skies in aerial dogfights. Demolish your surroundings for a strategic advantage. Harness complete control over every action and movement using the kinesthetic combat system. Drop into multiplayer with your squad, or fight furiously as a member of the Dagger 1-3 squad in a gritty, adrenaline-fueled single-player campaign where you'll defend a world on the edge of collapse.
The last show with David Cooper. Procrastinate your life away with us.
Gossip is bad for you. It's dysfunctional. You should never do it, or so you've been told. But what if whispering about others to your partner might actually be good for your romantic relationship? Well, according to a new research study, it might be. So let's spill that tea. I'm here with someone who worked on that research. She's an associate professor of psychology at the University of California, Riverside. Her name is Dr. Megan Robbins. Megan, welcome in.
Thanks so much.
Should we start with some gossip to make this interview a little better, or would that be too literal an interpretation of your research?
I wouldn't mind.
Anyway, let's start with the big one. Why would you study gossip? Like, what is so interesting about this human behavior that you would want to study it?
Yeah, I mean, I would ask you what's not interesting about gossip. So
that's a fair response. Honestly, I do love a little gossip, I got to say.
Yeah. I have always been interested in people as a psychologist, of course, and just as a regular person. So I study people. I study their conversations that they have with the other people. And it turns out a lot of those happen to be talking about others who aren't present, which we call gossip. And so we happen to have the kind of data that allows us to study different kinds of social interactions as they naturally unfold. We actually record people. And it just sort of gave rise to this idea of why don't we just go ahead and study gossip?
You know, there are the negatives, at least on the surface, like it creates an outgroup, it creates an excluded person, maybe someone spoken about negatively, but there's got to be positives, right? Like I'm picturing my old office workspaces with my little group of tightly knit coworkers gossiping about our boss, and it really bonded us. And I'm picturing the private discussions I have with my girlfriend Miranda, and it does bond us as long as it's not like, I don't know, too mean, right?
Yeah, I mean, you use the word tightly knit, right? So I bet that one of the things that made you tightly knit, in part, was gossip. So it really can serve this function where you feel more of an in-group. It can create the in-group. It can also facilitate that and further it, make you feel closer. Because when there is sort of an out-group, it sort of reinforces, like, we're a unit, we trust each other enough to share information behind someone's back and behind that person's back, right? And so that also sounds like it has more of a negative side. It could, right? It can alienate people. It can be negative, malicious, unnecessarily, but it doesn't have to be that way, right? You can use it to bond with others and not be so malicious with it. Yeah.
Let's talk about your study, because your methodology is like wild to me. I find it so interesting. You gave couples recording devices to wear. To me, that sounds like a recipe for chaos. Like, I might behave differently if I was knowingly recorded. What did you end up capturing? What sort of interactions did couples have? What did you tell them? Did they think they were being studied for this? Can you elaborate a bit?
I can. So we didn't tell them that we were studying gossip primarily because we didn't know we were going to study gossip using their data. We do get permission for the original study purpose, which was broadly speaking, studying how their social interactions are related to their well-being, relationship satisfaction, things like that. If they have questions about what we might study and what we really might listen for in the sound files, we certainly would tell them, but we can't anticipate everything that we're going to explore in the data before we collect it. So some of those things arise more naturally and they come up as ideas as we listen to the data as well. So the recording device that we use a lot in our research. We've used it in many other studies. It's called the EAR. It's a perfect acronym because it does listen to people. It stands for electronically activated recorder. And it's currently on an Android device. It's just an app on an Android device, and you can program it to record at whatever intervals you want it to for as long as you want it to. We like more short snippets of sound because it just gives us little samples of what life is like for people while they're naturally living it. So in this study, we recruited about 78 couples, and they wore the device over 2 weekends. And in this case, we were able to estimate how frequently they were gossiping, specifically with each other for this study.
If it was me, you would capture a lot of deep, intimate, private conversations about our cat, I feel like primarily, but also, I guess, gossip. And you found that couples gossiped on average, about 40 minutes every day?
Yeah, roughly. So in this study, we estimated about 38 minutes a day. In a previous study with 5 different samples, we estimated 52 minutes a day. So somewhere in that range is probably typical for people.
And how did you find that it made couples potentially happier? Like, how did you find any positive outcomes from this?
Yeah, so the scientist in me has to point out that it was a correlational study. So we don't know if gossip made people happier in their relationships. I actually wouldn't be surprised if that turned out to be the case the more that we study this topic. But we did find that the more couples gossiped with each other, the happier they tended to be and the more satisfied they tended to be in their relationships.
Let's talk about the mechanism. Is it just that they're maybe bonded? They're sharing things perhaps negative about other people and then trusting they won't get repeated? Like a nice little culture between them of secrecy?
Exactly. Yeah, the same thing I was saying before about like this in-group. I mean, what is more in-group than you and your intimate partner, right? And so you have this close bond. Maybe even I have this idea of, coming home from a party and, you're going home with your partner usually, right? And and what do you talk about on the way home? You talk about everybody else who was there, what happened at the party, what so-and-so said to you, what so-and-so, brought to the party, whatever have you. So I was thinking about that kind of a moment in my head when we were designing the study. And I thought, it's just this ultimate in-group moment where you say, we were out with our friends, we love them, but you and I are even closer, right, to share this kind of information with each other. So I think there's that. But there's also a sort of lighter piece to it that I think is probably also happening, which is that gossip is fun. So like any other shared activity that a couple might have, gossip could just be one of those.
Now, you mentioned the party, the talking about who was wearing at the party. I don't know why I wasn't invited to the party, but that's a conversation between me and my therapist. The content of the gossip, like what were the categories of things people were talking about? Was it work stuff, friend stuff? Were they trash talking people? Was it positive? What was negative? What did you observe in these sessions without giving away too many specifics, of course?
Sure. Yeah. So most gossip is just about social information, sort of exchanging like the status of things, so-and-so's getting married or so-and-so just got a job, that kind of social information. We looked at more entertainment kind of purposes. Those didn't happen as often as you would expect based on like Page Six and other sort of gossip arenas that are popular. In this particular study, we didn't actually look at the valence just yet. That's a future direction for us. So in our past gossip study, we found that most gossip was neutral, actually, rather than negative or positive, which means that it's kind of boring, right? So it's not that juicy or malicious kind of gossip that would be negative. It's really just, so-and-so's collecting stamps now. I don't know why I thought of that example.
No, but it's the kind of thing a couple would tell each other, but it is kind of boring to an outsider.
Right. And it's just not being evaluated by the people gossiping. It's not in a positive or negative light. It's just neutral. And that is most of gossip.
Is a fair takeaway from this, for the average person, that as long as it's not so negative that it's like extremely toxic, that we should forgive ourselves for gossiping and not really judge ourselves harshly for it, especially when we do it with our significant other?
Yeah, that's my takeaway for sure. I think that gossip is a regular part of a healthy social life. And I think that people shouldn't shame themselves about it. People definitely shouldn't shame others about gossiping. My work has shown that everyone does it. We had, I think, only one person in our study that didn't have any sampled gossip sound files. So I think we should all be a little bit kinder to ourselves when we find ourselves gossiping, for sure.
And here we are gossiping about the person who doesn't gossip. They're strange, aren't they? No, I'm kidding. Well, Megan, thanks for sharing your research with me and having this chat. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Dr. Megan Robbins is an associate professor of psychology at the University of California, Riverside. Scientists want your feet, specifically your toenail clippings. Inside them, a key ingredient that could help fight lung cancer. First off, gross. Second off, how does that work? We'll tell you up next.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Listening to this podcast? Smart move. Being financially savvy? Smart move. Another smart move? Having State Farm help you create a competitive price when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling, just another way to save with the personal price plan. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
We're broadcasting relationship truths and scientific discoveries with a comedian's touch. The last show with David Cooper.
Calling all humans with feet. This could be the singular moment in your life where you make the greatest impact on medical science. By mailing researchers your toenail clippings, yes, your humble toenails, might hold the key to fighting cancer. I'm here with someone who wants your toenails. His name is Dr. Aaron Goodarzi. He is a professor at the University of Calgary School of Medicine. This was just too tempting a story not to cover. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm asking for a friend. For those of us flexible and disgusting enough to bite our toenails, do you still want their toenails?
As long as you can spit them into the little baggie we provide, yeah, absolutely.
All right, I had to get the gross question out of the way first, but let's get to the interesting one. For those of us who've only thought of our toenails, maybe the last time we stubbed them, how could they possibly fight cancer or help you study cancer?
So it's a great question. Our hair, our fingernails, our toenails, our skin, these are all places that our body actually tries to get rid of toxicants that we absorb. And we're interested in lung cancer, particularly non-tobacco lung cancer caused by a radioactive gas called radon. And when you breathe in radon, what happens is that quickly undergoes radioactive decay and precipitates out as solid elements, which quickly become radioactive lead. Now, lead is one of those nasty things that our body tries to get rid of. It's not very good at it, but it does so slowly. And it puts it in places, as I said, hair, toenails, skin. Now, your toenails, the amount of lead in there, or in our case, radioactive lead, is a really good readout, as we found, for how much radon you've been exposed to over the past couple of decades.
How do we get exposed to radon? Like, I've heard it can occur naturally. It seeps out of the earth. It can end up in basements. Some geographic areas are worse than others in terms of radon exposure. How do we get exposed to it?
Yeah, so all of what you just said is correct. Radon is generated in the ground through a whole ton of different minerals containing things in the uranium decay chain, uranium to thorium to radium. There's so much radium in the ground all across Canada. We named towns after it. Lots of folks in Canada have been to radium hot springs. Well, all of that's been happening through all of human history, coming out of the ground and diluting on the wind to next to nothing that you would care about. But our modern buildings, I'm going to emphasize that word modern, which are quite airtight and are built in a very specific way, have become unintentionally the perfect radon capture and containment machines. And so instead of diluting on the wind, it comes out of the ground at the very high levels that it exists in the ground and stays there in our houses. And it's not just basements, though. It's also, because we have forced air ventilation in many houses, it mixes through the whole property. And that's how we get exposed to high quantities of radon.
Can we protect ourselves? Can I get like a radon meter, just like I have a carbon monoxide detector?
Yeah, absolutely. You can. There's multiple different ways for any Canadian to test their house for radon. So in the national study that I lead, which is publicly funded, we offer citizen scientist-based radon tests. These look like little ant traps or hockey pucks. You just put them anywhere in the house. These days, there's also a variety of different digital devices, some of which are excellent, some of which are less excellent. But yeah, any Canadian can test their house for radon. And importantly, if it is high, you can also fix it.
Oh, well, that's interesting. I kind of want to talk about that, but probably the toenails being a good measure for this stuff is more interesting. Your toenails, they're kind of like a living history of your exposure. How far back are we talking? Does a toenail know that I inhaled radon like 10 years ago?
Well, that is exactly what we looked at in the study we published a couple of days ago. So we looked at how well the amount of radioactive lead, specifically lead-210, in the toenails correlated to known radon exposure, whether it was known low or known high, over 5 years, 10 years, or the average of the amount of time people had spent in the houses, which was something in the order of 20 plus years. And the readings were good for back to 5 years. The reading was good back to 10 years. The reading was still good back to 20 years. My guess is that this technology is going to be useful for monitoring someone's radon exposure at least over a decade once we do the big validation trial. And that's going to be important because right now, no Canadian effectively has a radon test for every indoor air environment they've lived in for 10 years. And so this is a way to get to that information.
Most people have heard of smoking causing lung cancer, sure. But radon, I don't know that everyone has. How big of a risk are we talking here? Is a few months in a house with high radon as bad as smoking 10 packs a day? Like, what is the risk?
That's a difficult analogy to make. Let's just say so radon is measured in the amount of radiation it emits. And so for every 1 unit of radiation it emits, which is called alpha radiation. So you might have heard of an X-ray and a gamma ray. This is an alpha ray. They're very, very different. There you're comparing apples, not to oranges, but apples to rhinoceros, right? Because of what alpha particles do to our bodies, it's much more similar to space radiation. It's incredibly cancer causing. Now, for every 100 of those emitted per second per cubic meter of air, your lifetime risk of lung cancer is going to jump by 16%. Now, the average Canadian household is around 100. And 1 out of 5 contains more than 200, up to 30,000 becquerels. So we have people in Canadian houses in the national study, and they get more radiation from their house just going home every night than an astronaut on the International Space Station might get in a year.
Wow. I guess I do have to ask, how easy is it to fix? What can I do if my home has high radon?
Yeah, so this is great because it's one of those, very serious problems with a very effective and quick fix. So there are professionals in Canada called the Canadian National Radon Proficiency Program, or C-NRPP. They are trained, certified, and bonded, all that kind of good stuff to fix this problem. It usually takes 1 to 2 days on the average Canadian house, and it's a permanent fix for that house. So no one needs to have a high radon problem. And thankfully, as we look forward to the next building code, I'm told by Codes Canada, there will be proactive radon reduction solutions in the next build code.
So I send you my toenail clippings. I've been, let's just say hypothetically, I've got enough radon exposure to become like Spider-Man, Superman, a superhero. I know that's not how it really works. What really happens there is I have a high risk for cancer if I'm that individual. What do I do? Just do early screening for lung cancer?
Well, that's why we're doing this. Right now, no Canadian can receive a low-dose CT scan, which is how we screen for lung cancer, unless they're a pretty heavy tobacco smoker. And that's because to get the CT scan, the admitting team needs to understand your personal risk. And that has to be over a certain threshold, right? Because there's risks and benefits. A CT scan is radiation, right? So you have to have risk over a certain level. And so right now, because we can't do that for radon, for tobacco, you probably, if you smoke tobacco, you can probably remember when you started and roughly how much over whatever period of time. You can't do that for radon. That's why we're doing this. To develop the way that someone just has to send in their toenails, we can then understand what the radon looked like over the past couple of decades. We add that into the risk calculator and then get people screened if they need to. Right now in Canada, 2 out of 5 lung cancer patients we see in clinic, it's not tobacco. One has never smoked ever in their entire life. The other smoked so little or so long ago, tobacco is not causative to the tumor.
Well, I think what you're doing is great. It's a great marketing campaign to get people aware of this issue. You got the fun headline, like sending in toenails. You got the interesting science. What would you like to see, like in 10 years? Every house have radon mitigation, everyone tested so that this problem can just go down and lung cancer rates will hopefully drop?
Yeah, that would be amazing. I mean, it's not going to happen, right? Well, certainly what I'd like to see in 10 years is no new houses built without being radon proof. So that's one. Lung cancer screening, I'd like to see 10 years. Yeah, that's probably doable. On the basis of non-tobacco exposures, which again is increasingly important, not just radon, but also things like wildfire smoke. These are key things that we need to do to move the needle. And, for people, if they want to send their toenails in, they have to actually be eligible. And so you have to have lived in your house for at least 5 years. We'll send you a radon test with the toenail kit. And then you send both back to us. And that way we'll know. All that's done through the National Study website at evictradon.org.
Do your lab technicians get special standard issue nose plugs? Because not everybody's foot smells good. And I imagine the toenail doesn't smell great either.
Your toenails do have to be healthy in order for them to be eligible to send us. And yes to all the above. They do wear their PPE.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for sharing this research. This is a fun chat. I appreciate you coming on the show, Aaron.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Dr. Aaron Goodarzi is a professor at the University of Calgary School of Medicine. If people do want to find out more to send out their toenail clippings, where can they find you, Aaron?
Evictradon.org is the home of the national study, and they just have to click Test Your Home, and they'll take you where they need to be.
Thanks again.
My pleasure.
Your tongue, it's not just pink and innocent. It's a slimy ecosystem teeming with microscopic bacteria monsters. After the break, we'll dive into the disgusting, fascinating world of tongue scraping and why your tongue and everyone else's might need it.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
When did making plans get this complicated? It's time to streamline with WhatsApp, the secure messaging app that brings the whole group together. Use polls to settle dinner plans. Send event invites and pin messages so no one forgets Mom's 60th. And never miss a meme or milestone. All protected with end-to-end encryption. It's time for WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone. Learn more at whatsapp.com.
Broadcasting intimate details and useless information from an undisclosed location in New York City. The Last Show with David Cooper.
What if I told you your tongue is a festering swamp of bacteria, dead tissue, and food sludge, a horror movie hiding in your mouth? But there is something you might be able to do about it. Tongue scraping. I swear by it, and I am joined by a professor at the University of Pittsburgh School of Dental Medicine to discuss all things your tongue and scraping it. Her name is Dr. Martinna Bertolini. Martinna, welcome to the show.
Hey, David. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's start with the horror. What exactly is living on our tongues right now? Like, how grossed out should I be in this very moment?
Yeah, so millions of bacteria are there, food debris are there, pieces of the own tongue that keep sloughing off are there. And the goal of the tongue scraping is, can we get rid of them? Because we don't want them there at all times, right? So the cleaner we can get, the best. And tongue scraping is the easiest way to do it.
What is it about the surface of the tongue that makes it a haven for all this material? Like, is it different than, let's say, my skin or my nose or my teeth?
Yeah, so the tongue is very different. It's actually one of the only surface of the whole body that has what we call papilla. And it's a bunch of tiny little fingers that are there. And as we eat, as the bacteria get around it, food gets trapped in between those papilla. And we don't brush them as usual when we brush the teeth. Or we brush, but not as well. So the tongue scraper is the best way to scrape all these out. We don't want the food debris there, rest in pieces. We don't want bacteria there. Easiest way to get it done is just scraping them out.
If I took a little microscope with one of those little glass slides like I had in high school, and I took what came off my tongue and looked at it, would I regret that forever? Would I have nightmares?
Or maybe you would love it because now you're going to know what is there. And then you're going to be more motivated to get rid of it, right? Depends on how you see it.
So as I understand it, there's kind of two benefits here. One, it's like general health, the same reason you'd want to get plaque off of your teeth, but also bad breath. I think that's for me the biggest thing. My worry is that I have bad breath. I know I've seen what's come off the tongue because I do tongue scrape. It's wild. It'll change your life once you see it. But yeah, can you talk to me about these two areas? One, how it contributes to bad breath, and the other, how it might actually just contribute to general health.
Yeah, so on the tongue, we're going to have, as we said, those bacteria, and they'll be producing sulfur compounds, which are smelly gases that will come out of it. So the more bacteria accumulating in the surface of the tongue, the more they will be producing these sulfur compounds, and the more it can give you bad breath. So for most of the patients trying to reduce the bad breath, this is one of the first, most cost-effective and easy-to-do things. They just have to scrape the tongue out and they remove the bacteria, the debris, and with that, they'll reduce the amount of these sulfur compounds. So right off the bat, you're going to be able to reduce the amount odor that you would have in the mouth. And besides that, for many patients, especially elderly population or patients that, let's say, they're in the hospital, during COVID, we saw this a lot. The patients have to be intubated. We don't think about it usually, but the tubes, before they go into the trachea, they pass through the tongue. So we can push towards the lungs thousands of those bacteria. So it can really get important when we talk about hospital patients that need these devices sometimes. So health-wise, for this population, incredibly useful, but also for everyday people like you and I. Why don't we get rid of those bacteria? We are so obsessed with flossing and brushing, and I feel like the tongue scraping sometimes get a little scrape it to the side and people don't talk about it so much.
Tongue scraping gets scraped to the side. We should be teaching kids to do this. And a little quick brush with the toothbrush isn't enough. You can buy these things. They're like $5 and they're life-changing. I do have a theory, and I've never talked to anyone who's a medical professional about it, and I want your opinion. My girlfriend, Miranda, when she sticks out her tongue, whether she scrapes it or not, it's this perfect pink tongue. She doesn't get the white plaque that I scrape off. And so I have a theory that some people's tongues are less porous than others. And people like me who have porous tongues get a lot of bacteria in there. And she has what I'll call a perfect pink Hollywood tongue. Is it true that some tongues get more bacteria and require scraping a little bit more than others?
Yeah, some tongues are different, and we see these a lot with patients, especially smoking patients, because of the nicotine and everything, the microaggressions. Their tongue tend to be a little bit more rough. So people also have different tongues, but exactly right. As I said before, we have the papilla. The higher and more like voluminous they are, more you have spaces for the bacteria and for the food debris to accumulate. So some people might just not have as much papilla, or they might be a little more shallow other than long and scrapey around, right?
I was watching Taylor Swift at her recent tour, and she sticks out her tongue a lot. And when she does, it's like all white and gross. And I'm like, Taylor, you got to be scraping your tongue. We have to be teaching kids to do this. I don't know why my mother taught me to brush, but she never taught me to scrape. Do you think every household should be teaching kids to scrape their tongues?
Yes, and I think actually when we tell people, oh, you can brush the tongue, the process of brushing with the toothbrush, because it's kind of mild, it can give like a gag reflex to people. And because of that, they kind of shy away of using the tongue scrapers, when it's quite the opposite. The tongue scraper is one single movement. You scrape from the back to the tip of the tongue, and it's so more homogeneous, the force, that it doesn't give you the gag reflex. And I feel a lot of people are like, oh my God, if I put a toothbrush in the back of my mouth, I'm going to throw up. It's going to be horrible. I cannot do it. But the tongue scraper is a great way to do it. And it doesn't have as much gag reflex.
Can you overdo it? Like, can you scrape your tongue so much that you lose all your taste buds or maybe even lose all your dignity? I don't know. Like, can you overdo it, basically?
Yeah. So if you do it a lot and like with too much strength to it, what happens is it might create the reverse effect. And your tongue, to try to protect it, it might grow more this papilla. Because at the end of the day, it's a protective way for the tongue, because that's where the hot food coming. It's where you have touched from the attrite of the food. So it's a protective layer, because if you look underneath your tongue, it's very smooth, doesn't have papilla, it has a completely different feeling. So because of that, the surface, the dorsal surface, the top of the tongue, has those protective papilla. So if you do it too much, you might be stimulating the tongue, like, let's produce more, let's grow bigger, so they can try to protect it. So maybe that explains why yours is a little bit more rough than your girlfriend's.
I've overdone it. I probably have. I do scrape too vigorously. Healthy people, do they need to scrape though, or do you just recommend it for breath and possible health through, like, I don't know, the breathing and things like this that you described earlier?
Yeah, I think so. The good thing and the bad thing of the tongue is it has all this papilla, so they self-disconnect. They come out and they renew. So if you don't do it, at some point you're going to get rid of that because it's going to disconnect. It's going to slough off. So it's okay. But if you do it, you can have the benefits of having it cleaner. You remove all these bacteria. You remove the bad odor, the sulfur compounds that we talked about before. And some people even say they taste better, the food, because it refreshes all around the area where you have the taste buds. And then with that, the food goes more in easier, and then you can feel more the taste.
And probably we shouldn't eat a whole head of raw garlic every day as well. Is that good advice for bad breath from you?
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm so glad you could join me to advocate for really my favorite oral hygiene activity, Martinna. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This was informative. This was fun. And I think this is exactly what the people needed.
Yes, thanks for having me, and happy scraping.
Happy scraping. And what did you say? Don't let the scraping scrape to the side?
Yes, scrape it to the side.
Don't forget scraping. Don't scrape it to the side. Dr. Martinna Bertolini is a professor at the University of Pittsburgh School of Dental Medicine. Up next, how spy agencies have harnessed the double bluff. That's when someone wants you to think they're lying, but what they're doing is in fact genuine. So how did the KGB and the Soviet Union harness this technique? We'll find that out on Conspiracy Corner on the other side of the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
This episode is brought to you by Jack Daniels. Jack Daniels and music are made for each other. They share a rhythm in the craft of making something timeless, while being a part of legendary nights. From backyard jams to sold-out arenas, there's a song in every toast. Please drink responsibly. Responsibility.org. Jack Daniels and Old No. 7 are registered trademarks. Tennessee whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume. Jack Daniel Distillery, Lynchburg, Tennessee.
Exploring both interstellar and interpersonal space-time continuums. The Last Show with David Cooper.
The double bluff, an interesting psychological tool that spy agencies like the CIA or even the KGB from the Soviet Union might want to use. What is the double bluff? How has it been used? That is what we'll discuss here with Dr. Lee Kuhnle, a political science professor at Humber Polytechnic. He co-hosts the Uncover Up podcast, where our foreign correspondent, Tony Five, was recently a guest. It is Conspiracy Corner, and Lee, welcome to the show.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me. I got to admit that I'm a little worried about my ability to tell this story because just you and I were struggling with it, right? Like the idea of a bluff and then the idea of a double bluff suddenly complicates things so much that we were confusing ourselves. I mean, I think we had to look it up to see what we were talking about.
Next week on The Last Show, the triple bluff. No, I think the best example that we can all relate to is the romantic double bluff. When you're just starting to date someone and you don't want them to think like that you're insane and you think about them too much, so you just send them a little romantic text that says, "I'm definitely not thinking about you at all." Okay?
Exactly.
You're actually not telling the truth, but you're bluffing, but you want them to believe the truth.
Yeah.
Which is that you are thinking about them. It sort of achieves that, okay, well, I'm not crazy because I'm not thinking about you, but really, I've sent you this nice note and you know that I am thinking about you. You pretend not to care, but the person sees through it. Hopefully. It's kind of complicated, even the simple example.
Even the simple example. And now, how could one possibly weaponize this as a kind of a spy tactic? But if anybody could do it, it would have been the KGB. And this is an example that came from there. So let me just start with the example of what happened. So it's the 70s mostly. We're thinking the 70s and the 80s. There's a lot of left-wing militant youth groups, like kind of communist-inspired militant political radicals who are blowing things up in Western countries. I'm thinking like in the States, the Weather Underground, in Canada, FLQ, in Germany, the Red Army faction, or in Italy, the Red Army Brigade, right? There were all these kind of militant left-wing communist youth groups that were like causing trouble, and they were operating in the States, in Germany, in Italy. Now here is where the double bluff gets going. These movements were, I guess you would call it, naive and genuine. Like they were not being steered by the Soviet Union, not directly. Generally, these were organic movements where people were upset about the political conditions, and then they kind of caused some trouble. And then the Soviet Union, who is looking at this stuff, kind of smiling to themselves, being like, this is great. This is exactly what we want them to be doing, publicly announces in those countries where it's happening, oh, no, those people aren't with us. They're actually secretly American military. That's American military doing fake operations in your country. And that was the double bluff. That was...
And the goal is these movements are loosely aligned with the values of the Soviets.
No, and some of them totally want to create Soviet-style communism. In fact, they're sort of looking over their shoulder to Big Brother in the Soviet Union, being like, this is great, right? We're doing the right thing, right? Like, we want to start the communist revolution in these other countries. And the Soviet Union's like, no, that's American military, guys. Everybody look over there. That's the Americans.
So the truth is they want Soviet alignment. They actually have it, but then they lie and say it was the Americans doing these ops to garner more alignment, for people to distrust the Americans and for America to lose support, to not be the superpower, which is what was happening all along, but they lie to make it happen more.
Exactly.
I kind of understand how it's a double bluff. Let's talk about this leaked field manual. Basically, the Soviets put out a fake CIA or U.S. Army field manual that described how you could conduct these attacks, which was not real.
Okay, you're absolutely right. This is then how the double bluff itself was actually done. So the U.S. Army actually produces what they call field manuals. And basically these are learnings taken from previous engagements in the battlefield. And then they are put together in a way that would help future soldiers in future battlefields. So it's like, here's what we learned in Vietnam or in World War II, or here's what we learned, storming the beaches of Normandy, stuff like that. So there was a field manual specifically around insurgency tactics. This was Field Manual 30. Now, the Soviets, specifically a department within the KGB dedicated to creating forgeries called Line A. That's what they do, is they create forgeries. They created an especially good, accurate forgery, which pretended to be a supplement to the field manual. So it's like, here's your regular field manual. Oh, but then here's an extra addition that we sort of came up with later. And this is Field Manual 3031B, 31B being the supplement.
An addendum.
Yes, exactly. Now, this supplement is a forgery created by the KGB, but it looks really good. And what it basically pretended to be were instructions to insurgent American forces to pretend that they were actually left-wing radicals, to organize a left-wing radical organization within the country and then begin terror attacks within that country. Okay, that's what this forgery says. So now what the KGB would do when there were actual things happening in various countries, say in Turkey and the Philippines, there was actual civil unrest happening. This forged supplement would be sent to various newspapers, right? And the newspapers would get a leaked version of this field manual, which was instructing American soldiers to produce precisely the kind of terror activities that the domestic population was seeing all around. And then these newspapers would often publish this forgery, obviously as truth, suggesting, look, the Americans might be behind this. And the big play for the Soviets was to get American allies to be more suspicious of allying with the Americans because they're liable to do some kind of operation in your country. Withdraw your allegiance to the Americans, and then the only superpower that's left in the Cold War, well, it's the Soviets. And so we get the communist global revolution after all, is the idea.
Leave it to the Soviets to take this complicated tactic from poker, I guess?
Yeah, or romantic relationships in their infancy, as you suggested.
Now, what did the Americans say about this field manual? They obviously, and that's the thing, if the CIA denies it's true, I mean, they have a history of denying things that are true, and so the public doesn't believe them. It stirs up mistrust, and it gets people to be sympathetic to the Soviets that would have probably been anyway.
Yeah, so this is, again, one of the brilliant strokes of genius with this kind of disinformation tactic, is that when the denial actually strengthens the story, you're in big trouble, right? If your partner, because you started with the romantic example, if your partner thinks that you're cheating on them and you vehemently deny it, well, that's both what somebody who is innocent and possibly somebody who is guilty, they might have exactly that reaction. But let's say you were to admit it. Now imagine admitting it is, in this case, also some kind of weird double bluff. It makes any kind of way of figuring out what's actually happening in reality almost impossible, right?
Yeah.
You can't, there is no, anytime the Americans denied something like this, it just made it look more plausible.
I guess another way to do it is you're having dessert, there's a last bite, and you say, no, you have it, knowing that you want it, and then the person gives it to you. Well, this complicated tactic employed skillfully by the KGB, the double bluff, I think we covered this well. It was complicated, but I think we did, Lee.
Okay. I was worried.
Well, Dr. Lee Kuhnle is a political science professor at Humber Polytechnic. Check out his podcast, The Uncover Up. He joins the show along with his peer Nathan for Conspiracy Corner, and that's what this was. Lee, I'm not glad you were here.
I am not glad you did not have me.
Well, I'm secretly glad you're here. Lee, thanks. I appreciate you.
I don't even know what I said. Thanks, David.
Up next, a former fighter pilot who says he saw something up there. A UAP, a UFO, something our instruments can't explain. And he's trying to make it easier for people who have seen things to report them.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
When it comes to what your family eats and drinks, you know your choices matter. You're the expert because you know what fits your life. And getting it right starts with good information. That's why America's beverage companies are sharing more information about our ingredients at goodtoknowfacts.org. No spin, no judgments, just the facts straight from the experts for more than 140 beverage ingredients. Visit goodtoknowfacts.org.
For those who know that questioning everything includes questioning this show's existence. The Last Show with David Cooper.
What is really up in the sky, and what happens to people when they report unusual objects? From mysterious ones to UAPs, what is up there? Why should you care? I am joined here by a former fighter pilot and founder of Americans for Safe Aerospace, Ryan Graves, to discuss all things UAP. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, David.
So you've been a Navy fighter pilot, and from that, you've now been a serious voice speaking out about UAPs. For people who don't know what they are, who just know UFOs from the movies, what exactly is a UAP, and how are sightings and reports different than what we imagine?
Yeah. Well, a UAP generally is something that people see. They don't know the origin of it, the intent of it. Or really what it's, what it looks like, really. And typically that's potentially something someone might say, oh, well, that's an unidentified drone or something else, and they may be. But where the UAP get interesting is when they exhibit capabilities, what we would define as beyond the state of the art. And that can be a number of things from how they move to how long they stay airborne and how hard they are to detect. And it gives us a sense that perhaps we are experiencing technology that is doing things that we don't have the ability to do. And from my perspective as a former pilot, that's a very serious concern when we are identifying potentially technology that our adversaries may have, or maybe someone else, that can outpace us. That's a threat. That's where we spend billions of dollars, and it's something that we need to pay attention to.
I want to talk about you. Have you had a personal sighting in your time as a pilot? Ever encountered something in the night sky you could not explain?
Yeah, I was an F-18 Super Hornet pilot for the Navy for about 11 years, and we operated some of the most sophisticated sensors in that platform, from radar, electro-optical, electronic warfare, and other capabilities. And in 2013, when our radar got upgraded to a much more capable system while we were off the east coast of Virginia Beach, Virginia, we started to see these things all the time. And at first, we didn't know what they were. We just knew they didn't belong in our working areas. But every day they would be there. They'd be stationary. They'd be going all the way up to Mach 1.2 and exhibiting sharp turns and things that we just didn't necessarily have an explanation for. And again, we didn't quite know what we were dealing with, but eventually one of the folks in our squadron, a couple of aircraft, had a near miss with one of these objects as they were entering the area. And they simply described it as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere. So, a cube or a sphere going supersonic or stationary with, no heat emissions, no propellers, no jets, jet exhaust. It's not technology that I'm aware that we have that can do all of those things. Sure, we have helicopters, they can go stationary. We have drones that are small. We have fighter jets that can go supersonic, but we don't have one small, unique package the size, essentially, of a car that can do all those things whenever they want, as long as they want.
Now, I think there's something curious that happens when people try to report this stuff. There are declassified documents, nothing out of the ordinary here. I'm not going to go into wild conspiracy territory, but basically in the early Air Force projects, like in the 60s, they were trying to keep things secret from the Soviets. So if people saw stuff, the U.S. government would basically use UFOs as a cover and discredit the sightings to try to keep things secret from adversaries. That's all fine and well. But that history of discrediting people and making people who report UFOs seem silly or kooky has stuck with us to this day, and it makes real reports kind of not trusted. Would you agree with that kind of rough history and agree that it kind of muddies the water when people report things they can't explain?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was, I think that does account for one portion of the government's involvement, if you will, in this, where they've claimed that they have used that as a cover to, like you said, protect classified information. But that was in the 60s, 70s, maybe even say the 80s. But things are a lot different now. We're no longer the world's only superpower. And we have to pay attention to what our adversaries, such as China and others, are looking to potentially attack us with. So it's one thing to say the government is lying about UFOs in the 60s because someone saw a classified project. It's different when you have hundreds of reports on a near daily basis across the country and a lot of times across the world, especially over classified or sensitive national security sites within the United States. We can't just simply write off anything that might be happening as our government is here to save us and they have the right technology. That's not the state of play in the world anymore today, and we need to pay attention to the things that might be probing us, whether they be adversarial or something else.
Let's talk about Americans for Safe Aerospace, an organization focused on domain awareness gaps. That sounds, overly technical. What does that mean in plain English? What are you trying to do with this organization?
It's very simple. When I came forward about these issues that my squadron was having, slightly before I testified before Congress on this issue, it turns out that there were, many people that were having similar experiences across the country and across the world. And so they started reaching out to me in email first, and eventually we formed an organization to support the work stream. The bottom line is this happens every day to people all around the world and all around the country, and they don't have a place to go to provide this information such that it can be utilized to resolve this issue. They're either laughed at, or their careers are threatened, or they just simply dismiss it as a flight of fancy and go about their day. But these are the gaps where we are making ourselves vulnerable to whatever these are. And our adversaries are not going to be ignoring those gaps. They're going to take full advantage of them. So we support those people that come forward. We help to filter out the wheat from the chaff. And we work with partners in national or federal law enforcement and the scientific community to be able to start answering the question of what these are and are they a security issue.
We haven't mentioned aliens, and I think that's important. For me, that unidentified or unknown, I think is really important. It's really just about collecting these reports, and it's okay to say we don't know, but what's important is to investigate the reports so we can try to figure out what this stuff is. You kind of have me with that. When we start to talk about fanciful alien explanations, I'm like, okay, there's not enough evidence for that. This lack of mention of aliens, like, that's not what this is about, is it?
Well, no, we don't, within our organization, make any assumption about the progeny of these objects. And like you said, we don't have enough information to do that. And I think more importantly, we lack, I think, the scientific framework to say, okay, if I spot X, Y, and Z on this vehicle, then I know it's from some other planet or something else, right? I don't have that scientific framework. I'm not sure anyone does at the moment for how you would make that assumption. Now, I will admit the things that people are reporting, very credible, very serious people with a lot to lose, frankly, are reporting very fantastical things. Objects that accelerate at rapid speeds, that can trail aircraft and interact with them. Very large vehicles, apparently using propulsion systems that we're not aware of. So how do we make that step to say, okay, there's something here and we think we have an understanding about it? That's what we're working towards, to build that understanding, to build that data set and that scientific framework so that we can start to make intelligent decisions about what the data represents.
On a personal level, being an active duty pilot and coming forward about this stuff, that can't be an easy move. Like, do you face stigma or pushback from your peers, people in your community?
Yeah, it was a tough decision. Fighter pilots are, by the book type people. And when you're in a squadron like that, it's the tall grass that gets cut, if you will. So I had a lot of, anxiety about coming forward, but I truly did believe, and I still believe, that doing this and having this conversation is what is best for national security, and ultimately being able to provide the tools and situational awareness to people flying in those jets so that they can mitigate the safety risk and ideally acknowledge and mitigate any national security risk that comes with them.
Well, Ryan, I've enjoyed the discussion. I appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks for sharing your story with me, talking to me about Americans for Safe Aerospace, and being here.
My pleasure, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Ryan Graves is a former fighter pilot and founder of Americans for Safe Aerospace. A lot of people think IQ tests means raw intelligence, something that's hereditary. But when you look at identical twins, same genes, same DNA, if they're separated and schooled differently, one seems to score way higher on IQ tests than the other. Why? It might all come down to school. So after the break, we'll talk to a neuroscientist whose research is rewriting what we think we know about intelligence. I guess that's good news for me.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
At Blinds.com, it's not just about window treatments. It's about you, your style, your space, your way. Whether you DIY or want the pros to handle it all, you'll have the confidence of knowing it's done right. From free expert design help to our 100% satisfaction guarantee, everything we do is made to fit your life and your windows. Because at Blinds.com, the only thing we treat better than windows is you. Visit Blinds.com now for up to 45% off with minimum purchase plus a professional measure at no cost. Rules and restrictions apply.
Prepare to have your mind blown as we delve into the complexities of relationships, explore the cutting edge of science, and celebrate the bizarre and beautiful absurdity of the world around us. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
what if your IQ wasn't written in your DNA? Not hardwired at all, but rather reflected in your school report card. Well, a new study on identical twins and their IQ scores suggests education might shape your intelligence more than your genes ever could. I'm here with a cognitive neuroscientist who's done research in this area, and his name is Dr. Jared Cooney Horvath. Jared, welcome in. Thanks for coming on to talk about this study.
No, thank you so much for having me on. This is kind of a niche topic, so I love that someone else is interested in it.
I think for decades we've heard that intelligence is genetic. It's more nature than nurture. I don't know that I've necessarily believed that, but that's what I've heard, and your study challenges that. Can you walk us through it in simple terms, what your study sought to find out and what you did find out?
Absolutely. So it's the big genetic argument for IQ always comes back to identical twins raised apart, right? So you've got these group of people who have the same genes, they were raised in different households, but lo and behold, they have the exact same IQ, therefore it's genetic. Now there's a lot of reasons like flutzing around that you can kind of play with, but that's the big argument being made. So I decided to go, okay, is that true? That is a massive claim. Let's dive into all these separated twin pairs and see, is the genetic argument best, or are there what we call moderators? Are there other things that can explain how these twins have similar or dissimilar IQ traits? So that's kind of where this whole thing began.
Yeah, at the risk of oversimplifying it, is intelligence nature versus nurture, or some combination and blend between?
Yeah, and we had reasons to believe one or the other, but everyone just kept coming back to these twins. So here's the joke. For as much as you'll hear everyone say, oh, identical twins reared apart, from the 1900s onwards, so since we've had data, I was only able to get data from 87 separated twin pairs. Wow. Which, to be fair, 87 separated twins is very sad and personally disruptive, but for all the claims people make on these twins, that's a very small amount of data to make these huge claims. But, you take with what you got. So I take these 87 twin pairs, and I was able to go back and track their schooling to say, okay, when you were separated, how much schooling did you get? And how similar was it to your separated twins' schooling? Did you guys go to school in the same country? Did you go to school for the same time? Did you have the same basic curricula? And lo and behold, of those 87 twin pairs, what you find is 53 of them had nearly identical schooling. They were in the same school district for the same basic time. Like, here's an example. So my two favorite, Bertram and Christopher. These were twins. They were separated in 1944. Their mother died during childbirth, unfortunately, so they were separated at birth. But they were raised by sisters who lived right next door to one another. So these two boys grew up together. They used to walk to and from school together. But because they were raised by different women, it didn't matter that they were only 10 feet apart. They were considered identical twins reared apart. So when you look at them, their IQ differed by one single point. So they were almost spot on. But when you get past those 53 twins who have basically the same exact schooling, when you get into those other ones who have, like another pair, Herta and Berta, these two were born in 1918 in Central America. And unfortunately, Berta was sold by her father when she was 4 years old. I know that's yeah. I guess that stuff used to happen.
Different time. Yeah, wild.
But so Berta is sold, and she only attends a total of 4 years of schooling in her life, whereas her sister Herta attends 14 years of schooling. You compare them, their IQ differs by 22 IQ points. So when you actually start looking at the difference between the twins being separated and their schooling, what you find is all those twins who have basically the same schooling, they differ on IQ by about 6 points, which is exactly the same as identical twins raised together. So they look the same, and that's where everyone says it must be genetic. But when you look at those twins with different schooling, they differ on average by 15 IQ points, which makes them basically complete strangers. You pick two random people off the street, they'll differ by about 15 IQ points as well. So this is, once you take into account schooling, you start to realize maybe it's a lot less genetic, a lot more academic than we ever thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it seems like from that, the classroom can actually reshape our intelligence. Does schooling change our brains in any measurable ways? Like if I got 6 years of, maybe I'll quit in high school and my identical twin has a postdoctoral whatever in philosophy, like would our brains be different?
Absolutely. And this is one of the fun things about brains is they're kind of like fingerprints. From the moment you're breathing, they start to change in very much based on your experience of the world. And that's how, even if you take twins off the table, if you just have a sibling, like me and my brother are only about a year apart, but my goodness, we grew up in the same house. We should be very similar. And we have similar laughs, but that's about as far as we go. And it's because of, the brain is so highly malleable that even small differences, if you experience a cold 2 days before I do, we will process them differently and our biology is going to reflect it differently. So it looks like one of the big determiners when it comes to IQ is schooling. The more you do it, the higher your IQ. And so you see that in the twin data, but luckily someone else went through and did a meta-analysis and said, okay, forget twins, let's just look at general IQ across the population. Does it correlate with school? Correlates at almost 0.97. Which basically says, for every additional year of school you go to, your IQ will jump 1 to 5 IQ points. And that's year on year on year. And that is causation now. We now know, not correlation. So basically, if you wanted to get really pedantic about it, IQ is not measuring intelligence in any meaningful way. It's measuring school ability. How good are you going to be at school? And just like any other ability, practice it more, you'll get better at it. And that's what IQ is showing us.
Is that the big takeaway? Like, I remember when I was a kid, we went to the fish market in Florida and they were all sold out of crabs. And the person said, go to the dock. So me and my dad went to the dock and there were a bunch of drunk Floridian fishermen, celebrating their catch. And they sold us some crabs, but they kept on saying to me, stay in school, don't be like us. Is that the main takeaway? Were these fishermen really, given good information?
When you see that intelligence is not some sort of trait like height or weight. It's not something that you were born with. It's something you create, and you have a big say in that its creation based on what you do. I think that argument that stay in school becomes pretty dang important. Like, as another kind of aside, and this goes beyond the paper, but it's just something interesting, is back in the 1920s, there was a place called Colvin's Hollow. So this is in the Blue Hill Mountains of, I want to say Virginia. I might be butchering that, but somewhere. So this small group of people for about 200 years had zero outside contact with the world. They were all related. They were all inbred. They just had their own little place. It was called a hollow, and they had lived there for 2 centuries, and that's it. When researchers went out and looked at IQ with this group of people, they all had incredibly low IQs. They were all in about the 50s to 60s, except the young kids. Young kids under the age of 5 had completely average IQs. So they repeated this with other isolated groups like sea nomads and gypsy bands, and they found the same thing. So what they realized was we're all born with basically the same IQ. It's just people who then don't go to school, people like in sea nomads will never go to school, their IQ will start to drop. People who go to school, their IQ starts to raise. So you can now say either people in these isolated communities are somehow losing intelligence the same way I would lose weight if I went on a diet, or IQ is not measuring intelligence, it's just measuring school ability. Go to school, it'll go up. Don't go to school, it'll go down. And if you want, now, to be fair, school ability has a lot to do with life success, so it might not be intelligence per se, but it is really important. But I think it's important just to draw a line and say it's not some inborn thing that we're measuring, it's just a skill. It's a practiced skill.
I think that's a good takeaway, that IQ isn't some innate trait, that you're somehow more intelligent and born that way. It really is just kind of a measure of education, right?
Put some work into it, keeps going to school, and it will constantly go up. We can all improve our intelligence, and we're doing it all the time.
All right, like the Floridian fisherman said to me, stay in school, David, is the takeaway. Well, Dr. Jared Cooney Horvath is a cognitive neuroscientist. Jared, thank you for sharing your study with me and talking to me about IQ.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Old wisdom. Video games are bad for your mental health. Full stop. Well, it turns out it's not about how much you play, but how it fits into your life. In fact, in some cases, video games can improve your mental health, according to a new study. Details in just a minute.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
In the 70s, 4 young women were found dead. For nearly 50 years, their cases went cold. I'm Nancy Hixt, a senior crime reporter for Global News. In the season finale of Crime Beat, I share how investigators uncovered shocking evidence of a serial killer and hear exclusive interviews with the killer's family. Listen to the full season of Crime Beat early and ad-free on Amazon Music by asking Alexa to play the podcast Crime Beat.
When the day is done, we're just getting started. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Video games rot your brain. Or do they? Have we been blaming them unfairly? Well, a new study says it's not about how much you play, but rather how gaming fits into your life. So let's press start on this idea. See what I did there? Press start. I'm joined by someone who worked on a study in this area. He's a psychology researcher at the Oxford Internet Institute, and his name is Dr. Nick Ballou. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
I always envy people who study things that, like, when you go to study it, you get to play video games. So I guess my question for you is, what motivated you and your team to look at this link between gaming and mental health? What were you hoping to learn?
Yeah, we were really hoping to piece together for the first time how people's play sessions, what they're playing, how long and when relates to how they're feeling. And this is a topic that people have studied for quite a long time, but they've mostly studied it by going to ask people, what games did you play? How much time did you spend playing games for the last 2 weeks? And we know very clearly at this point that is a really hard question to answer. You don't get very high accuracy from people when you do that. But the nuances of when that play is happening, what time of day they're playing, how recent it was relative to when you ask them, how are you now feeling? Those things probably matter a lot in determining whether those play sessions are affecting you positively or negatively. So we were looking to get the kind of data that could give us those answers, that could really give us a detailed picture of people's play across many games, across a long time period, and see if we could get a little more precision about games and mental health.
So you took some extra care in designing the questions that you'd ask these respondents. For years, we've heard the phrase "too much screen time is bad for us." I feel like I've peddled that idea on the show, and I've had people on who've done studies that if you simplify them, they communicate that idea. How is your study measuring things from a different approach and not really just looking at it like screen time bad, no screen time good?
So in the first instance, we did look at it in that way. We sort of tried to, in one sense, replicate what other people have done and shown about screen time being maybe this unidimensional, simple monolith that can tell us whether things are affecting us positively or negatively. And in both the study that you're talking about and some previous ones, we continue to find that that is not the case in games. When we look at playtime, if we just sum up all the time that you spend playing games and see, do the people who play more feel better than the people who play less, or vice versa, we don't find that. We consistently find that there are people who are playing upwards of 4 hours a day who feel great. There are people who are playing very little to none and they feel poorly. And so the amount of time itself just isn't telling us very much. So we started with that. We sort of debunked it to an extent, at least for this particular area of screen time in digital media. And then we tried to look in a little more detail about, well, if it's not just the time, what is it instead? And so we asked people to tell us about how they thought games fit in to certain other elements of their life. We asked them to talk about games in relation to their ability to focus on tasks, games in relationship to their social relationships. How are games helping you connect with others, or do you feel that they are impeding your ability to connect with others? Are they supporting your work in school, or are they hindering your work in school? And those questions, regardless of how much time people spent playing, were much more informative about whether they seemed to be doing well or doing poorly in relation to their games.
Yeah, this gaming life fit and those questions you just presented to me seem really interesting. What were some of the answers to these questions? What did you find?
So these, in the first instance, are just a scale from sort of -5 to +5. Do you think games are affecting your work and school for better or for worse? And we find that people tend to stick to the sort of the midpoint or maybe a little bit negative, is sort of the average response. People have some self-awareness that's maybe games are getting in the way of my social relationships a little bit. Maybe they're getting in the way of my work and school a little bit. Maybe they're getting in the way of my physical health, maybe my sleep, or in some cases, in severe cases, hygiene a little bit sometimes. But there are some participants who really seem to be making a conscious choice or reflection about how they want games to fit into their life. And they go and they'll play very intentionally. I choose to play this game with this group of people because I know that this reliably makes me feel good, makes me feel close and connected to the people around me. This game makes me feel competent and masterful after a long day in a job that maybe doesn't give me that same thing. So we see that some people who are, picking the plus side of that scale are maybe also playing games in a different or more intentional way that they seem to benefit more from.
Positive effects on mental health from video games. I got to say, I'm surprised by these findings that in some cases, video games can confer a positive benefit. Were you?
Not at all. I mean, we hear that all the time. We hear it most often in sort of the individual story level. When we go and we ask people, we give them either an interview or a big text box where they can tell us about how games fit into their life. You hear really, really powerful stories of people who are going through a job loss or a period of unemployment where games are really a lifeline for them. You hear people who have lost a family member or a loved one who games are a way to sometimes escape from their grief and sometimes even sort of confront their grief and process it. The social elements remain huge. Something like 80% of gaming now happens in multiplayer spaces, and people report all the time that games make them feel closer to others.
Yeah, they give them a sense of community, some of these online games, and kids play with their friends. It's like a social hangout.
100%. The digital playground. Like that is the core, probably the most important thing that games are offering people at the moment.
Now, your results, could they mean anything for parents or even policymakers, teachers that really focus on limiting gameplay and sort of treating it as all a waste of time? Would you have any recommendations to parents or teachers or even policymakers from this study?
So I would say it is pretty preliminary at this point. So this is really the first study that's managed to collect that kind of behavioral data I was describing on this scale. And we don't want to make statements that are too strong. We are studying adults, so we're studying 18 plus, and the way that adults are able to kind of scale their responsibilities up and down to shift things around to make time for gaming is different than children's ability to do the same thing. So time might affect children differently than it affects adults. But I do think high level, I hope that this study can push us to think more about quality and less about quantity. Doesn't mean that we should ignore time completely, but I would much rather hear parents and policymakers talk to players about the specific experiences they're getting. Why did you choose this game? What is it offering you in this moment that maybe another activity couldn't or doesn't? How does it, what are your experiences of other players? Are you having toxic experiences with other players? Are you having really positive, cooperative ones? Those factors, I think, are much more important than the time itself. And this study seems to bear that out. So I hope that those are the conversations that we can be having.
You looked at Nintendo games, and I think anyone who plays games knows that Nintendo games are kind of in this special place. They focus more on puzzles. They're often less violent. The company itself has a big emphasis on fun. If you looked at like shooting games or competitive esports, do you think you might find the same results or different results?
We'd find the same thing, and we have, in fact, found the same thing. So we did other studies on Xbox in the past, and right now our flagship project is what we're calling a multi-platform study. So we're now capturing gameplay across Steam, Xbox, Nintendo, and mobile, iOS and Android. So we've captured something like 3 million hours of gameplay covering every genre you can think of under the sun. And that high-level point about time not being the key ingredient of a healthy relationship with games continues to bear out. So there's nothing in our data to indicate that we should be demonizing certain genres over other ones.
Good. On a personal level, after running this study, do you feel any more or less justified in spending that lazy afternoon at your console?
I do. I certainly try to think about it. I try to ask myself, all right, what would I be doing instead if I wasn't gaming now? What is sort of the alternative activity that might give me the same sense of calm or the same sense of mastery? And I try to make sure that I have other options. I think that's what comes out of this for me, is that games, when they offer those things, is great, but they shouldn't be the only source of those sort of satisfactions. But yeah, even the days that I sneak into 4 or 5 hours, I don't feel too guilty about it.
I came into this interview thinking you and your peers just manufactured this study to justify gameplay, but I'm coming out of the interview kind of learning a lot and appreciating you sharing the study with me.
I'm glad to hear that.
Thanks for being here, Nick.
Thanks for having me.
Dr. Nick Ballou is a psychology researcher at Oxford Internet Institute. That is our show. Thank you so much for tuning into it. Don't forget, The Last Show has a podcast. Head to www.lastshow.pizza. That's .pizza, not .com in your web browser. Find out details, and please do subscribe. Although I can't tell you what to do, I'm not your mother. But who am I? David Cooper, and this was The Last Show. We'll catch you tomorrow night.
Doug. Here we have the Limu Emu in its natural habitat, helping people customize their car insurance and save hundreds with Liberty Mutual. Fascinating. It's accompanied by his natural ally, Doug.
Limu? Is that guy with the binoculars watching us?
Cut the camera. They see us.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Savings vary. Underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates. Excludes Massachusetts.